Hello and welcome to this very special edition post-US election by Mercury Partners Academy. I have the pleasure to have Rosa Associates, Brunello Rosa, professor at distinguished universities and CEO, head of research of Rosa Rubini Associates. He's a regular guest of Macro in the Markets. So Brunello, welcome. And together with Brunello, we have Mr. Francesco Castelli, who is the head of credit and fixed income at Banner Capital from London. With Francesco, we also do regular episodes of Macro in the Markets on the fixed income side. So pleasure to have you both.
Thank you for having me, Marcello.
So why don't we start? Obviously, just a few hours have passed. We're still trying to make some sense. Why don't we start from Brunello? Let's analyze the vote. What has happened?
Yeah, so votes are still being counted as we speak. So there are still a few elements that needs to be finalized. However, it seems obvious that Trump has won, is way ahead in the count of the Electoral College, and many leaders around the world have already congratulated him, which means is one of the strongest indications that the vote has already kind of decided. As we expected before the election, if Trump were to win, it would be a sweep, meaning that he would also take control of the House and the Senate, as he did. Most likely, again, there are still some votes to be counted and therefore some seats to be confirmed. This means that Trump, like in 2016, will have a complete control of government. So White House, Senate, House of Representatives, and effectively through his nominees of the Supreme Court. So very hard to make any challenge anywhere. It will nominate ministers, so Secretary of State. It will be confirmed by the Senate that it controls. Very hard to start any impeachment because that tends to start at the House. Any law that reaches the Supreme Court will likely be either confirmed if it's in his favor or rejected if it's against him, which is extremely unlikely. So, 2 years of almost complete control of government. He has a blueprint of what he wants to do. It's called Project 2025. Let's see how far it will go. In terms of economic policies, I'm sure we'll have chances to discuss this during our conversation.
Perfect. So let's start from a topic that you master, geopolitics. Obviously, the very first question that comes, we got two important wars close to us in Europe. The consensus was, the popular consensus was, if Trump wins, the war in Ukraine is likely to end. And the Middle East maybe as well. What's your view, starting from the wars first as a geopolitical move?
Yeah, I know what the popular consensus is, but I don't agree with that. Middle East. Yesterday, Netanyahu, on the day of the election, and it wasn't chosen by chance. He chose the day in which he would know that media would be looking somewhere else, and possibly his friend Donald Trump returned to the White House. He fired Gallant, the defense minister, which was one of the few less hawkish, and I don't know even if we can call it doves, in the government, let's say less hawkish, more in favor of reaching an agreement and withdrawing from Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and so on. Fired. Instead, other hawks had taken the position, and this means that it's likely that there will be an escalation in the war with Iran, so even a bigger target. So I don't think the war in the Middle East will end anytime soon. Ukraine, he can claim that he can stop in a day, but would it be the case? Let's think about the following. It would only end in a day if he surrenders to any of Putin's requests. But why would Ukraine accept any of that? Why the Europeans were to accept any of that? There's no reason. So there will be discussions at the very least, most likely still fight on the ground in Ukraine. to see whether this war can end in less favorable terms for Russia. So I don't see these two conflicts closing anytime soon.
Perfect. Just to finish the picture in terms of European geopolitics, another point that now President Trump has been saying is that Europe needs to spend much more money on defense, on NATO, because obviously you cannot be part of an alliance and contribute to less of its weight. What are the chances that, stretch governments already, France, Italy, the UK as well, with a tough budget just announced. What is the chances that there will be a lot more pressure on the governments, even if wars end or don't end, to have to increase spending on military?
There will be definitely an increase in military spending, and that would be also what Trump requests, not to impose tariffs on his own allies, 10 or 20% on imports. So he said, look, unless you spend at least, because 2% will become a floor, not a ceiling of GDP in defense, I'm going to impose tariffs on you. Now, on Europe, somebody says, finally we have such a big threat that will finally unify, understand we need to move as a unified continent. Donald is exactly what we need. I totally disagree with that. When Europe was faced with isolationist president, has it happened in the past? Okay, in the US, it was a disaster. Europeans tend to infight. They don't tend to unify. They grow out of their own crisis, not the crises that are imposed from outside. So Draghi put the report on the table, said, look, unless we invest to unify more, we are dead. Now, people say Trump will be the excuse to do that. I don't think it's going to be the case. People will have very different opinion on how Europe should grow. And around this division of views, there will be further infighting and less unification.
Okay, thank you. Let's pause for the moment on geopolitics. Give the word to Francesco Castelli from Banner Capital. Francesco, again, welcome. Let's move to markets. Let's start from your specialty, fixed income. So we saw the 10-year yield moving up and up as the chances of a Trump victory were more and more likely. Now he's president. What do you reckon is going to happen to the bond market, starting from the US and then to us, to Europe?
Yeah, the bond market has been under pressure for a while, actually, and because none of the candidates, so neither Kamala nor Trump has mentioned fiscal consolidation, right? And so bond traders, the so-called bond vigilantes, are very worried because they know that debt to GDP in the US will grow over time, and it would have grown anyway under both candidates. In the case of Trump, the consensus is that Trump will push this trajectory higher and higher in a more aggressive way than Kamala Harris. So yes, it's I do agree with market moves that see bonds down and yields up. It's going to be challenging, especially if the Trump administration puts pressure on the Federal Reserve. Trump has already argued with Powell on his policies, and so there will be a growing pressure on the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve at this point, they cannot cut rates too aggressively because Trump policies will already be inflationary, will already push growth up. So they might be good for growth, Trump policies, but they will not be good for interest rates that will continue to remain relatively high, and inflation will continue to remain higher than expected. So that's the negative reaction on bond, which was a consensus in the case of a Trump victory. The good thing this morning is that European bonds actually are moving up, not down. So that there's this decoupling we've seen over the last 6-7 weeks is continuing, which is good, let's say, for European bonds, and that's a good news for us fixed income traders in Europe this morning.
Perfect. Obviously we're not giving, this is an educational program mainly for students. We're not giving any investment views, opinion, or indication, but just for educational purposes. What's your view on the level of the 10-year in the US? Could it reach as high as 5%? Will it stabilize at 5.5%? Where do you see this going? Obviously, those are just ideas.
Yes, of course. It's as I said, we have the Federal Reserve tomorrow. Don't forget about it. So Powell, we have his opportunity to speak. They are going probably to cut rates tomorrow, but the interesting bit will be the trajectory for future rates, right? And it's not something that will be sold tomorrow. 5%, it's a possibility, but it's a risk scenario. 5% in the 10-year yield is a risk scenario, but it's going to be a mixture of what the Federal Reserve decides to do and the policies that Trump will enact. So it's not something that is going to happen overnight. The good news is that US yields have already increased a lot over the last 2 months, let's say. So I would say that a lot of the bad news is already in the market for US bonds. But yeah, there's a material possibility of further downside for US bonds.
Okay. And just to conclude this topic, I'm going to ask a question to the economist, Brunello, and to you as a fixed income specialist. Are we entering an era of debt scare? We saw what has happened in France with election. Italy is enjoying a moment of actually bonanza for the time being. We're not making the headlines as we usually do. We see now more and more awareness to something that was not mentioned very much years ago, now is the US debt. So are we stepping into not only in a new geopolitical phase, but also in a new global debt phase? That's a question to both of you.
Yeah, I may start. Yes, if you look historically, debt to GDP ratios go up and down quite significantly. They tend to follow a geopolitical cycle. The big spikes in the past have been the Napoleonic Wars and the two world wars. Okay, not surprisingly, you have to spend a fortune just to defeat your biggest geopolitical enemy. But this is in relation to GDP. It's not in absolute terms. So then growth ensues, and then the GDP, the debt to GDP ratio falls. Again, we are in a geopolitical transition here. Actually, we are in the middle of a geopolitical depression, if we can use this word, with China rising, a bipolarization of the world, and so on. And therefore, not surprisingly, debt to GDP ratios are increasing again. And I think it will stay there for some time. Now, the question is, how do we get, we will have eventually reduced that. Well, growth will be the natural, how can I say, solution. And potentially AI can help in this respect, but it's not going to be the only one. Some inflation might be required, as it always be the case, financial repression, and similar kind of methods induced by government. So, it's going to be a mixture, but this is a period in which debt to GDP ratios will be high across the globe, I think.
Thank you, Francesco.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
totally agree with Brunello. Very interesting view. I'm going to give you more of a, let's say, trader's view. And if you look at spreads, it's very interesting because we are already in this phase. Actually, if you look at credit spreads for corporate bonds are coming down. They've been coming down for a couple of years now. Credit spreads for government bonds, on the other side, if you can call them, so the distance between yields on bonds and yields on interest rate swaps, actually credit spread for government bonds are increasing. So you have a tightening in credit spreads and a widening in government bond spreads, which is very interesting. And again, it is a transfer of wealth between what you see in between the corporate finances that are improving gradually and government finances, which are deteriorating, like Brunello was saying, for a very specific geopolitical reason. So yes, it is a grand event has been going on for a while right now, but I think it will continue. I totally agree with Brunello's view.
Thank you. Let me touch a topic which students love, cryptos. You know, one of the consensus was digital currency, Bitcoin. We saw Bitcoin actually moving up significantly with chances of a Trump victory becoming more clear. You, Brunello, just published a book. I don't know if you have a copy handy with you or you want to show. If you don't, just mention the title on digital currencies by central bank, but obviously it touches also on all the other currency. What's your view on, let's touch Bitcoin and the role of digital currencies, especially with Trump president going forward?
I don't have the copy of the book at hand, but I can quote. It's actually called Smart Money, has been published by a publisher called Bloomsbury, which happens to be the one of Harry Potter. The people wizardry coming. The book is on the geopolitics of central bank digital currencies, which are effectively the response by governments to the rise of cryptos and the cryptography, stable coins, and so on. We saw that Bitcoin was going up. This is because Trump changed his mind, as it happened in other occasions, and became one of the strongest supporter of Bitcoin. This is also thanks probably to the influence of Elon Musk, which, as we know, is a heavy investor on that. He has created his own cryptos and so on. So, you know, under Trump, I think they will flourish more simply because he will not impose the regulation that others would have imposed, and they will come around the globe, I think. As of central bank digital currencies, on the other side, instead, I think the US in this, since Trump has already said, and this is actually the opening page on the book, Trump's speech on January 18, when he said, under my watch, the US will never have a CBDC. I think the US will lose 4 very, very precious years in developing their own digital currency. That instead is about to happen in the UK and in the Eurozone, as well as in other countries. And first and foremost, China, that has already adopted in 2022. So China is ahead of everybody. The US needs to realize that de-dollarization is happening, will happen even further with Trump's presidency. It's just not happening in the way that they expected. They expect a country to run a current account deficit, to have an open capital account to freely trade the currency, for this currency to become dominant. The Chinese have adopted a totally different approach based on technology and infrastructure. It will continue, and I think the US will lose 4 very, very precious years during Trump's presidency.
Sure. The Chinese start in 2014, I believe, right?
They started in 2014, so 10 years ago, and you don't recoup 10 years in 10 months. It really takes a number of years to develop the technology, the legal system, the administrative procedures, just to handle this big thing that is the CBDC.
So just to finish on the geopolitics big topic, which is obviously US versus China. You mentioned tariffs. There is the Taiwan issue with the AI and the chips, high quality chips produced there, obviously. How do you see this very long-term topic evolving under a Trump presidency?
There's a Cold War there. We call it the new Cold War, the second Cold War, call it as you want, between US and China. The first one was between the US and the Soviet Union. One of these legs is the technological leg, and we see it in chips production, quantum computing, big data, AI, the space race, you name it. There are several dimensions, including the one on the CBDC that I mentioned before. But then at the very bottom of it, there's always the trade war, the old-fashioned trade war. We have seen them repeatedly in history. Generally, that they just create lots of damage and nobody wins. They tend to create protectionism that initially is considered to be beneficial for the domestic economy until you realize that you actually destroyed international trade, which actually is in the long run much more beneficial So you see, for example, in the equity market reaction, equity markets in the US today are booming, at least the futures. In Europe are much more cautious because there will be an impact on European economic activity from Trump's tariffs. China is already in a difficult position given its decline in growth potential over the last few years, but still is the rising power. And so I think together with this economic might, it will want to increase its geopolitical presence, and therefore the clash between the incumbent power, the US, and the rising power is almost inevitable. The question is, Graham Allison asked himself years ago, is a hot war between these two inevitable? I don't know if it's inevitable. For sure, there's a Cold War, and I think it will be with us for the next few decades.
Sure. So we are in this phase and we'll stay in this phase. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
Let's maybe finish with something related to crypto, but crypto is just a minor application, which is very dear to students, very dear to me, and very dear to you. AI, artificial intelligence, obviously, it's a massive concept. I just wanted to, my view is that this is going to impact everybody's life in a massive way, especially new professions. Many jobs will die, many jobs will be created. But one thing is for sure, you cannot ignore, and you need to be prepared, especially if you're young, because that will shape future jobs, career, and life. Life as a consumer, life as a citizen, and life as a person, and life as an ethical human being, because there are many questions. So what's your view on, very generally speaking, do you agree, do you disagree? If you have any comment, maybe let's start from Francesco.
Yeah, of course. It's especially for students, it's particularly important. I have to say, not all universities are well equipped to give to students the right tools, because it takes time, right, to learn the technology and then to share it with your students. And I think it's very important. We are integrating in our workflow AI, and of course, we think over the next few years, onboarding students as junior trainees with knowledge of AI is going to be very, very important. And we see that it's not easy for universities. So as we say, AI is not gonna steal your job. People using AI better than you will steal your job. That's a key concept that students have to keep in mind. So try to learn AI, even if your university is not that. The technology itself is simple to understand, is built to be easy to understand. Our computers are learning how to speak with human beings, right? And so it's. But yeah, absolutely, we are big believers in the impact that AI will have on our job. We are all becoming much more efficient with it, but it's also going to be much more competitive, the landscape.
Thank you. Brunello, I haven't read your book yet, but I don't know if it touches on AI as well. I'm sure it does in a way. What's your view?
So as I was saying, is one of the many fields in which there's a competition at global level, and definitely between US and China. And it's even hard to know who's more ahead. So the US has definitely an advantage on chips manufacturing. NVIDIA has probably the best chips for that, but also, of course, TMC as well in Taiwan. With the question mark on whether Taiwan is closer to the US or China, that will be answered in coming months and years, I think. But in any case, definitely is going to be a key battlefield. And those who will be able to dominate AI at global level will have a massive competitive advantage. Just to give you an example, there's an estimate that if AI is well implemented at global level, the US growth potential can reach 3, somebody even says 3.5% by the end of the decade. Meanwhile, China's growth potential is falling to around 3%, with unchanged policies, of course, because they can always adapt. Imagine a world in which the US is growing at 3.5%, and China is growing more or less at the same level or lower. That would be a total change in paradigm. Things will look very, very different in a world in which the dominant power is still able to outgrow the challengers. So definitely is going to be, just to give a macro view of this topic, one of those things that we definitely have to look much more closely in coming years.
That's certainly a topic to learn and to keep following, because it impacts all of us in many, many aspects. With this, I thank you very much, Brunello Rosa from Rosa Rubini Associates, Francesco Castelli from Banner Capital from London. I remind students, tomorrow, the 7th of November, we'll have Mercury Partners Academy presenting, introducing Amundi SGR. Amundi is the biggest asset manager in Europe. There will be the HR department. So if you're looking for a job in asset management and you are in this time at Ca' Foscari, come on board. But we have, with the Academy and with our distinguished guest, many, many updates to come. Brunello, thank you. Francesco, thank you. Banor and Rosa Rubini, thank you. And we'll see you soon. All the best.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.